Hello, everybody. I hope everybody's doing well. This is the next episode in my True Tales of the Paranormal series for the month of October. And I want to tell you tonight one story it's a story of my own, and it was about when I was newly married many, many years ago. My ex-husband and I had friends, another couple, that we had gone to high school together, and we piled around together. And one of our favorite things to do was to take late night drives. And we liked going up the mountain roads. And there's one canyon, it's called Kern Canyon, and it's by Bakersfield, California, that was a really twisty, turny, it was 90-degree turns almost all the way up, and you had to drive kind of slow. And there's one side of the road was a pretty steep drop off down to a river, the Kern River. And the other side of the road was a pretty steep uphill up the mountain. And it was a pretty high mountain. So we used to go up to a place called Kernville, and they had a little coffee shop that was open 24 hours. And they had the best pies and coffee and any kind of late night snack you want. I mean, they were good. So that was our favorite place to go. And they have a freeway now that goes up the canyon up to Lake Isabella in Kernville. But this was long before that was even thought of. So we're driving up the road, and we got talking about the news that we'd heard several reports of people talking about a green rectangular shaped mist. It was a bright green that they were reporting seeing in the canyon. It would come down the mountain and go across the road and then go down to the river and up the other side of the mountain. Well, we heard that on the news several times in the past week, and we were like kind of laughing about it. And so we go, well, maybe we can see the mist tonight, joking around. So we go up to the top of the canyon. It was about a 45-minute drive. And we get to Kernville, and we go to our favorite little cafe, and it was just a very pleasant night. We, good camaraderie, and we had our coffee and pie, and we were getting ready to come back down. And by this time, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. So we're coming down that twisty, tiny road. It's just a little narrow two-lane road. And we're driving down. Of course, you have to drive kind of slow. And so we're just talking and driving down there. And my girlfriend in the back seat with her husband, she looks up the hill and she starts going, there it is, I see it. And so we're all like, so my ex-husband stops the car, and we look up the hill. And sure enough, we see this from distance way up on the hill. And it's just moving like across the ground, but very slowly amongst the trees. And it kind of just cruising really even and slow. So it gets down, we sit there, we stop and watch it. And it comes down to the road. And, of course, when you're in your early 20s, you're invincible, right? And so we're just like, yeah, whatever, And it wasn't really scary. It was just like surprising. And kind of it was like one of those, wow, look at that kind of things, So we watch it come down, and it comes across the road. And it is in this perfect block rectangular shape, but it's a green mist. So it stops right across the road in front of us. So we're about 50 feet away from it. And so we sit there and we're looking at it and marveling at it and trying to guess what it is. And so my ex-husband says, well, what should we do now? I mean, if it's not going to move. And so I said, well, let's drive through it and see what happens. So, of course, like I said, we're young and, whatever. So we drive through this block of green fog. Now, I don't remember what it looked like inside the fog. I don't recall seeing anything. But we were on the other side. And we stopped the car, and we're looking back. And it still sat there for like a couple of minutes. And we sat there and watched it. And then it just started moving again. And just very slowly, very methodically, goes down over the side of the bank and continues down toward the river. And we hear like this kind of crashing sound, like maybe a couple of trees went down or something. And we're like, we didn't know what happened. We didn't really want to know. But so we started up again, and we're going down the road probably a little faster than we should have. And we looked, I looked back. I rolled my window down and stuck my head out and looked back, and you could see it very slowly and methodically just going across the river, right across. And the river was a pretty fast flowing river. I mean, a lot of people took kayaks up there and stuff and rode the rapids. It was not a slow moving river. And it went across the river and slowly, same pace, very smooth, very calm, and went up the side of the bank and continued up the mountain on the other side. So we get back down to town and get to our apartment, and the four of us are sitting there going, what did we see? What was, and we didn't report it or anything. We just decided that, well, that was cool, and we let it go at that. But that was one paranormal, if you call it paranormal, it might have been UFO, I don't know. But that was quite an adventure. And we talked about it for like a long time after that, and thought how silly it was for us to drive through it. But it wasn't solid. I mean, you could see through it. It looked like just fog. And so evidently it didn't get upset that we drove through it either. It just kind of sat there and thought about it for a little while and went on its way. So we went on down, and we never saw it again after that. But it was a little while before we actually drove the canyon at night to go up to our favorite little restaurant. So that was the end of that story. And we never saw it again. So my second story, this one is kind of a funny one, because I thought I saw a ghost. Anyway, my grandfather on my father's side, he was just a mean old nasty old curmudgeon. And he was very hateful and mean and bitter, and I don't know why. That's the way he was. And he was always mean to everybody all the time. Well, he'd gotten old, and he was in the hospital, and he was dying, basically. So my father and I flew in from California, where we were living, to Ohio, and we drove to their farmhouse, their little community where they lived. And so they had a 2-story farmhouse, and the upstairs had a huge room, and I'm not sure what it was used for, but it was big. It was a big room. And they put rows of cots in there because there were so many people showed up for the funeral. And this is out in the country. And so they put all the kids, including myself and my cousins. I was 29 years old, but I was still considered a kid. And so they put all of us little ones and us big kids in the room with all those rows of cots. So we were all up there the night before the funeral, and we'd all gone to bed, and I hear this walking on the stairs. And my grandfather was so mean, I forgot to tell you this part, that about a week before he died, he asked my uncle, which would be his oldest son, to bring him his shotgun. And he wanted him to pick up his shotgun and bring my grandmother, his wife, to the hospital the next day. And my uncle said, well, Dad, you can't have a shotgun in the hospital. And my grandfather started screaming and yelling and insisted he have his shotgun and his wife in his room. Well, needless to say, that didn't happen, thank goodness. But my uncle questioned him about it and said, why did you want your shotgun? He goes, because it's not fair that I die first. If I have to die, she's going with me, because she has no right to live past me. Nice guy. So Anyway, I'm laying in bed on the cot and I'm trying to go to sleep. And my cousin is right directly next to me, across from me. And her name was Georgia Gay. So we're laying there and trying to go to sleep. And I hear these footsteps on the stairs. And they get closer and closer. And I thought maybe one of the adults was coming up to check on the little ones. So in the doorway, I look up and there's my grandfather. Just plain as day. And so I'm like terrified. I'm thinking, oh no, he's gonna come back and do us all in. And so I watch. I couldn't take my eyes off him. I was, but it wasn't like a ghost. It was solid, like he was actually standing there. My cousin saw the look on my face, and she looked over there, and she looks at me, and she goes, "What do we do?" And I go, "I don't know." And I said, "Just pretend you're asleep." So we laid there, and he was going through the rows of cots, just looking at all the kids and, like curious. And he walks over and he stands between my cot and my cousin. And I could see her over there in the dark. And we were looking at each other like, oh my goodness. So he just stands there and we pretend we're asleep. And I could feel that he bent down and looked at my cousin. Then he leans over and he looks at me, and then he turns around and he walks out of the room, and I could hear him going back down the stairs. Well, I didn't want to say anything to the adults downstairs. Some of them were kind of freaked out and believed his threats that he was going to come back and get us all, because it wasn't fair that he died before the rest of us, because I didn't really believe that he could. And so neither one of us really said anything to anybody. So the next day at the funeral, I'm sitting next to my dad. And my grandfather's I'm like 3 rows back from my grandfather's body. He's in a casket. He's, how they have him in the front of the room. And then they have a little podium. And my uncle, the oldest brother, was going to get up and go give the eulogy. So he starts to get up and starts to walk up there, and all of a sudden I see what I thought was my grandfather in the doorway again. And he's coming in the room. But he's in the casket, right? So I have some aunts that, well, aunts and uncles. They have no filter, shall we say. They say whatever they think, whenever they think it, regardless of what it is. And they could be quite embarrassing sometimes. And but some of them were like that. They were very, very outspoken with absolutely no regard to what they say. But anyway, she's very loud, and she was sitting right behind me. And my dad was looking at his brother up at the podium, and I nudged my dad and pointed, and I said, "Do you see that?" And my dad looks over and just kind of looks for a minute. And my aunt behind me, just booming in the room, she goes, "Well, Walter, if I didn't know that was you, if I didn't know it was you, I'd think you were laying right there in that casket." She said, "That could be you." And I'm like, talk about no tact. Anyway, it turns out that my grandfather had an identical twin brother that none of us had ever heard about. His name was never mentioned. He was never talked about. I mean, as far as his kids knew. And we'd never met him or anything. I didn't even know the man existed, but he was an identical copy of my grandfather. So it's kind of a funny story that it turned out to be his identical twin. It wasn't my grandfather's ghost. So and then I felt kind of silly after that, but I didn't know the man existed. So anyway, we will talk to you later. And that's my crazy stories for tonight. So you can believe it or not believe it. It's the month of October, and they're true stories. So that's my stories, and I'm sticking to them. So you guys have a good night, good morning, good evening, wherever you are. And you guys just take care. Love ya.